I was still shaking snow off my coat when my Aunt Lydia leaned in with that tight smile she always wore when she thought she was doing me a favor. "Maybe don't bring up your job situation," she whispered, her breath smelling like peppermint schnapps and condescension. "It'll depress the kids." I hadn't even taken off my shoes yet. I blinked, caught between a laugh and a sigh. "Sure," I said. "Wouldn't want to ruin the festive mood." Then I smiled like I hadn't heard that exact line in 5 different variations at every family gathering for the last 2 years. I dropped my coat on the designated guest bed, kicked off my boots, and followed the sound of forced laughter into the living room. "My name's Aaron. I'm 34, and for the last decade, I've been the co-founder of a tech company that most of my family still thinks is some little computer thing. They don't get what I do, and they've never really asked. At best, I'm good with computers. At worst, I'm unemployed, but makes websites for money. I stopped correcting them years ago. It's easier that way. After all, how do you explain seed funding rounds and venture capital to people who still think the Wi-Fi goes out when it rains? Thanksgiving with my extended family has always been a delicate exercise in restraint. I keep my answers short, smile through the backhanded compliments, and let the conversations drift towards safer waters. The truth is, I've always been the odd one out. I didn't go to med school like my cousin Ellie or become a civil engineer like my older brother, Mark. I didn't marry young or buy a house in the suburbs. I didn't give my parents grandkids to brag about at church. I built something, from scratch, quietly, and apparently, that made me the least impressive person in every room. This year was supposed to be different, though, or so I thought. I'd driven 6 hours through sleet to get to Aunt Lydia's house because my mom guilt-tripped me into it. "Everyone's coming this year," she said over the phone. "Even Cody's bringing his fiancée. You'll love her." She always said that as if loving someone was my responsibility, like if I didn't fall in line and nod politely, I was the problem. Cody is my younger cousin by 4 years. He was the golden boy, even as a kid. The kind of guy who peaked in high school and just kept skating on charm and good hair. His parents bragged about him like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. Never mind that he'd bounced between 4 different majors in college and burned through a trust fund in his 20s. He was a go-getter, while I was just quiet. I stepped into the living room and immediately regretted it. The whole space was decked out in the kind of autumn Pinterest overload only Lydia could pull off. Tiny pumpkins, plaid blankets, grateful heart, signs in cursive. The kids were screaming over a Mario Kart match on the big screen. The adults were gathered near the kitchen island, wine glasses in hand, laughing a little too loudly. I spotted Cody across the room, one arm slung around a tall brunette with impossibly straight teeth. She looked like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle blog. "Hey, there he is," Cody said, grinning wide and waving me over like I was the waiter bringing appetizers. "Uncle Tech Guy? You make it out of your mom's basement, or what?" The words hit me like a slap, not because they were original. He's been recycling that joke since 2015, but because of the casual cruelty tucked into the delivery. He said it in front of everyone, loud enough to get a few chuckles. I forced a grin. "Good to see you too, Cody." "Seriously, though," he said, handing his fiancée a drink and turning fully toward me. "What have you been up to? Still doing, like, websites and stuff?" There it was, the opener. I could play it safe, toss out something vague and unthreatening, or I could answer truthfully and risk a full derailment of dinner. I went with the usual. "Yeah, still working with a couple startups. It's been good." He smirked and raised his eyebrows. "Startups, huh? That code for unemployed." "Cody," Aunt Lydia warned gently, but she was smiling too. She always did this, acted like the referee while secretly egging him on. "Don't worry, I'm just messing with him," Cody said, raising both hands in mock innocence. "I mean, I'm sure Aaron's got some top secret project. Probably building the next Google in his garage." The room laughed again. I laughed too, but it felt hollow in my throat. I made my way to the drink table and poured myself a generous glass of red. My mom caught my eye and gave me the kind of smile that was meant to be reassuring, but only made things worse. Like she was proud of me for not causing a scene. Like enduring humiliation was some kind of quiet strength. Dinner was called an hour later. We all crammed around the long table Lydia had set up with name cards and faux gold chargers. I was wedged between Ellie and Aunt Pam, both of whom were already a few glasses deep into their wine. Across from me sat Cody and his fiancée, whose name I still hadn't caught. "So, she said brightly, looking right at me. Cody told me you work in tech too. Before I could respond, Cody cut in. Yeah, kind of. He's more like a freelancer. Like gigs and stuff. Got it, she said, nodding politely but with that look, half sympathy, half dismissal. I didn't blame her. She didn't know better. Actually, I said, setting down my fork, I run a company. Cody laughed. Oh yeah, he's the CEO. Of what exactly? Aaron, tell them the name. It's something like Pixel Crunch or Byte Dust or whatever, right? Byte Nest, I said flatly. We build enterprise security solutions. We just closed Series B funding last quarter. There was a brief silence. Not long. Just long enough. Cody blinked. Wait, seriously? I nodded. Seriously. He looked at me, then looked at his fiancée. Then he smiled again, but it was thinner this time. Well, guess we're both in tech, huh? She looked impressed, which seemed to annoy him. He just got an interview at Everlock, she said proudly. Super competitive. Big deal. Nice, I said. I've met with their board a few times. Good team. That's when he smirked and said it. Doubt you'd even get past security. It was a joke. At least, it sounded like one. But the edge in his voice was unmistakable. A challenge. An attempt to put me back in my place. My stomach tightened. I looked around the table. Some were laughing, some just quietly watching. I stood up, slowly, and grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. Everyone fell silent. I'm the CEO, I said. See you Monday. And just like that, the entire room froze. I didn't wait for their reactions. I walked out. But that was only the beginning. By the time I got to my car, the adrenaline had turned sour in my stomach. I wasn't even sure where I was going. I just drove. Out of the cul-de-sac, past the row of identical houses with their glowing porch lights and blow-up turkeys, through the slick streets until the quiet hum of the tires steadied my breathing. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just kept hearing his voice echo in my head. Doubt you'd even get past security. It wasn't the insult itself that got to me. I'd had worse. It was the way it landed with the others. How no one spoke up. Not my mom. Not my aunt. Not even my brother, who I caught smirking into his napkin like it was all just harmless fun. It was the ease with which they all let it slide. As if that kind of jab was normal, expected, even welcome. Like I deserved it. I parked in a grocery store lot and just sat there, gripping the wheel, watching my breath fog the windshield. Part of me wanted to drive back home. Call it a night. Leave them to their wine and pie and whispered gossip. But another part of me, the part that had stayed quiet for years, started to simmer. I don't know if it was the look in Cody's eyes or the way his fiancée's smile flickered when I said the words, I'm the CEO, but something shifted in me. I realized then that no matter how successful I became, no matter how far I'd climbed, my family would always see me as that quiet kid with the hand-me-down laptop and big ideas no one took seriously. I didn't go back that night. I booked a hotel on my phone, grabbed some takeout, and spent the rest of the evening watching reruns of The Office with the sound turned low. But I didn't sleep much. My mind kept replaying the dinner, dissecting every glance and every chuckle. I kept thinking, why do I keep showing up for people who don't respect me? The next morning, I checked my phone. 8 texts from my mom, 3 missed calls. All versions of the same message, please come back. Let's talk. It got out of hand. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the one place I always found clarity, a little coffee shop downtown, the kind with too many plants and lo-fi music playing on loop. I ordered a black coffee and sat near the window, watching the snow fall in soft waves. That's when my brother Mark called. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. You good? He asked, skipping any kind of greeting. I'm fine. There was a pause. Cody was being a jerk. You know how he gets. I do, I said. And you laughed. He exhaled sharply. It wasn't about you, man. Don't be so sensitive. My hand tightened around the coffee cup. Right? It's always a joke when it's about me. Look, he said, you made your point. The whole CEO mic drop? Iconic. But maybe don't overreact, yeah? You've always been kind of private. People just don't get what you do. They don't even try to, I said. They assume the worst and call it a joke. Okay, he said quickly, as if afraid I'd hang up. Look, just come back for dessert. Everyone's asking about you. Are they? I said. Or are they just wondering if I'm going to ruin more of their perfect night? He didn't answer that. Just said, think about it, and hung up. I didn't go back that day either. But the thing about family is, you can't avoid them forever. especially not during a week-long holiday visit where half of them are staying in the same town. Eventually, the gravitational pull drags you back into orbit. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got an invitation, game night at Lydia's. Please come. Let's put the awkwardness behind us. It was from my mom, followed by a guilt-tripping their family, Aaron. So I went. Against my better judgment, I went. The moment I walked in, I knew nothing had changed. Oh look, it's Mr. Silicon Valley, Uncle Jerry said, holding up a solo cup in mock salute. Cody gave me a nod from across the room, his arm draped around his fiancée like he was posing for a catalog. You made it, he said, as if I were the one who owed him something. Just here for the games, I said flatly. They were playing charades. Something about the fake laughter and the forced closeness made my skin crawl. I kept to myself, only speaking when absolutely necessary. But I noticed things. How Cody kept slipping in little comments, just low enough that only those nearby could hear. How his fiancée looked at me differently now. Curious, maybe even a little intimidated. And how Lydia, ever the queen bee, watched me like I was a wild card she didn't quite know how to handle. Then came the breaking point. It started small. A joke during the game. Someone acted out The Social Network, and Cody shouted, "That's Aaron's origin story, except with fewer friends and way less money." People laughed. I didn't. I stood there, stone-faced, and said nothing. But later, as we gathered around for dessert, Lydia brought out a cake. "We're celebrating Cody's big interview," she announced. "He's up for a job at Everlock." Fingers crossed. There was applause. Cheers. Cody beamed like a groom at his wedding. And then Lydia turned to me. "Aaron, maybe you can give him some pointers?" she said, too sweetly. "You've applied to places like that, right?" I blinked. "I've hired from places like that," I said. The room quieted again. "Well," she said, laughing nervously, "maybe you could help Cody with a mock interview? You know, since you've got the time." And that was it. That was the moment. The moment I realized they didn't just misunderstand what I did, they chose not to understand. They needed me to stay small so Cody could keep shining. I set my plate down and stood up. "You know," I said, "I don't think I'm the one who needs help preparing." Cody snorted. "Oh, you offering me a job now?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I already did," I said. "Last year. You ghosted the interview." Dead silence. His smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" I turned to Lydia. "Remember when I asked if anyone in the family was job hunting? I was expanding my team and wanted to help. I sent you the listing." She nodded slowly, her eyes flicking to Cody. "I sent it to you too," I said. "Through Mom." You never replied. Cody's face had gone pale. "I didn't," he started, but I held up a hand. "It's fine," I said. "I figured you weren't interested in startups. But just so you know, ByteNest has 3 full-time engineers who came from Everlock, including their former director of infrastructure." More silence. I took a breath, feeling my heart hammering in my chest. "I'm done pretending I don't exist," I said. "You don't have to understand what I do, but you will respect it, or you'll never see me at one of these gatherings again." Then I walked out. Again. But this time, something followed me. Not someone. Something. A shift. A ripple. A reaction I wasn't expecting, at least not from her. Because the next morning, I woke up to a message. Not from my mom. Not from Mark. From Cody's fiancée. "Hey Aaron, can we talk?" And that was when things got really messy. I didn't reply right away. Her message sat there in my inbox like a forgotten candle still burning. "Can we talk?" For words, plain and harmless on the surface, but heavy, like they knew more than they were letting on. I read it half a dozen times before tossing my phone onto the hotel nightstand and pulling the comforter over my head. The walls were thin. I could hear someone wheeling a suitcase down the hallway. Somewhere, a baby was crying. My eyes were wide open. It's strange, the moment after you stand up for yourself. You expect it to feel like freedom, some mix of triumph and peace. But in my case, it was mostly silence. Not external silence, but the kind that hums inside you like the aftermath of a fire alarm. It rang in my ears while I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd gone too far. My phone buzzed again later that morning. This time, it was my mom. "Cody is devastated. Lydia says you embarrassed him in front of everyone. She's talking about not inviting you to Christmas unless you apologize." I didn't respond. A second message came 5 minutes later. "I know you didn't mean to cause trouble, but maybe just call and clear the air. We're family, Aaron." I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth slowly, watching the steam rise around my reflection. I looked tired. Not just the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the deep kind. The kind that builds up after years of swallowing your pride until your stomach is full of unspoken words. My toothbrush paused mid-stroke, and I said out loud, "Why is it always me?" No one had called to ask if I was okay. No one asked what I was feeling. Instead, I was the one expected to fix it again, to patch the cracks I didn't cause, to take the high road because no one else would even look for one. I spent the rest of that day walking around the city, hood pulled up against the cold. I bought a coffee I didn't drink and wandered through a bookstore, flipping pages but not reading a word. It wasn't until I found myself sitting on a park bench at dusk, watching frost creep over the grass, that I finally opened her message again. "Hey Aaron, can we talk?" I typed a simple reply. "About what?" She responded in less than a minute. "About Cody, about what you said, and about Everlock." That got my attention. "I don't want to make things worse," she added. "But I also don't want to be part of something fake." We arranged to meet at the same cafe I'd visited after Thanksgiving. She showed up wearing a beige wool coat and a look of quiet resolve. No makeup, no flashy smiles. Just someone who looked like she was waking up from a long nap and seeing the room clearly for the first time. "Hi," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," I said, though part of me was still guarded. I didn't know what this was yet. Curiosity? Guilt? Drama? She wrapped her hands around her mug and looked down. "I think I owe you an apology." That, I hadn't expected. "I didn't really get it at first," she continued. "When Cody joked about you, I thought it was just sibling rivalry. Like, he made it sound like you were this guy who never left his mom's house and worked on weird hobby apps. But then I Googled you." I blinked. "You Googled me?" She nodded. "ByteNest has an article on TechCrunch, and a Forbes piece, and a patent." I just sipped my coffee. She leaned in slightly. "Why don't they know?" "Because they never asked," I said. "And when they assumed the worst, it was easier not to fight it. You try to explain something once or twice, and when all you get is rolled eyes or smirks, you stop trying." She nodded slowly. He's insecure. He says stuff to make people laugh, but he gets weird when someone outshines him. I see it now, but at first, I don't know. I just thought that was normal." I looked at her carefully. "So why are you here?" She hesitated. "Because I'm not sure I want to marry someone who tears people down just to feel tall. And also," she paused again, "I think he lied about the Everlock interview." My eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "He told me he had an inside connection. Said the recruiter reached out to him. But after what you said, I looked into it. There's no record of a recruiter ever emailing him. He's been avoiding my questions all week. And when I asked him about your company, about ghosting that interview, he flipped out." I leaned back. "So he's been trying to impress you and keep up with you," she said. "He saw your success as a threat. And that scares me. Because if he can't even celebrate someone in his own family doing well, what happens when I succeed at something?" I stayed quiet. She wasn't really asking me. Eventually, she gave a tired smile. "Anyway, thank you for standing up for yourself and for not sinking to his level." She left after that, with a promise to figure some things out. I didn't press her. It wasn't my relationship to fix. That night, I returned to my hotel and opened my laptop for the first time all week. Notifications flooded in, investors checking in, an engineer asking for approval, a product manager requesting feedback. It felt good, oddly grounding, like a reminder that the version of me my family refused to see did exist and was, in fact, thriving. I buried myself in work for the next few days, not out of spite or distraction, but because it reminded me who I really was when no one was watching. I scheduled a board meeting, closed a hiring round, and finalized a partnership with a European cybersecurity firm, all from that hotel room. And the more I leaned into my real life, the less weight my family's perception carried. But the storm wasn't over yet. A few days before I was set to head home, my mom invited me to brunch. "Just you and me," she promised. "No drama." I agreed, hoping maybe we could finally talk like adults. We met at a quiet diner just outside of town. She hugged me a little too tightly when I walked in, and for a second, I thought maybe this would be okay. Until she started talking. "You really hurt Cody," she said, stirring her tea. I froze. "He hurt me." "I know," she said quickly, "but you humiliated him. In front of everyone. He's your cousin. And I'm your son," I said. She sighed. "You've always been sensitive, Aaron." I laughed, bitter and low. Sensitive or tired of being mocked. You could have handled it differently, she said. Why did you have to make a scene? Because they wouldn't hear me otherwise, I said, sharper than I meant to. Because I've spent 10 years building something no one in this family even tries to understand. And the moment I set a boundary, I'm the problem. She looked away. And you know what? I continued. I'm done apologizing for existing. There was a long silence. Finally, she said, you've changed. I've grown, I corrected. There's a difference. We didn't speak much after that. I paid for her tea, hugged her briefly, and walked out feeling lighter. I returned home 2 days later. My apartment greeted me like an old friend. Sunlight through tall windows, the soft hum of my espresso machine, the scent of cedar from the candle I forgot I left lit. I stood in the center of my living room and just breathed. Home. That week, I threw myself into the business. We launched a new beta. I was invited to speak at a virtual conference. Byte Nest was quietly gaining momentum in circles that mattered. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. Then, one morning, an envelope showed up at my door. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in shaky cursive. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single folded page. Aaron, I owe you an apology. I've spent years letting other people define you. Through jokes, through assumptions, through silence. And I'm ashamed of that. You deserve better. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Aunt Lydia, I read it twice. Then I set it aside and stared out the window. Maybe they were starting to wake up, but I wasn't done yet. Because something had shifted inside me over those few days, something irreversible. I no longer needed their approval, but I did need to decide what came next. And that's when I had an idea. Something Cody would never see coming. Something that would rewrite the entire script they'd written for me. I picked up my phone, opened my notes, and began to draft a plan. It was subtle at first, just a few scribbled thoughts in my phone's notes app while I sipped espresso and watched the sun creep across my apartment floor. But within days, it evolved into something sharper, more deliberate. The gears in my mind, long rusted by silence and forced humility, were turning again. For once, I wasn't just reacting to my family. I was planning. I didn't want vengeance just for the sake of it. This wasn't about rage or pettiness. It was about balance. About finally, reshaping the dynamic they had carefully built over decades, brick by brick, where Cody could coast through life on charm and empty promises while I was quietly discounted in every room. This time, I wasn't going to let my success speak for itself. I was going to make them listen. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week into the new year, I got a text from my mom. Hey honey, Lydia wants to host a Family Futures brunch next Sunday. Everyone's coming. Could be a chance to reconnect. Family Futures brunch. I nearly laughed. It sounded like one of Lydia's cringy little branding efforts, like she was throwing a TED Talk in her kitchen. I could already picture the mimosas, the pastel index cards for goal setting, the performative speeches about investing in ourselves this year. It was peak Lydia, but buried under that glittery layer of nonsense was the real motive. This was a chance for Cody to shine. Again, he probably pitched the idea himself. He'd be standing there in his tailored shirt, announcing his goals with that fake humility, dropping Everlock's name every 5 minutes. He needed to re-establish himself as the golden boy, and I was going to let him. Because this time, I wouldn't be caught off guard. I texted back, sure, I'll be there. And then I got to work. First, I called my COO, Marlene. She was sharp, no nonsense, and loyal to the bone. I filled her in, not on the family drama, but on the publicity angle. We're going to soft launch the SecureBridge deal at the end of this month, right? I asked. Yep. Press release is drafted, NDAs are nearly done. We're just waiting on SecureBridge to finish their final audit. What if we pre-teased it? Just enough to stir buzz. She hesitated. You mean leak it? Not quite. Just make sure the partnership is discoverable. Quietly. Maybe update our LinkedIn headers. And I'll post something subtle. Let people connect the dots. She paused, then chuckled. You're up to something. Let's just say, I've got an audience I need to re-educate. Within 24 hours, ByteNest's landing page was tweaked with a vague reference to an upcoming enterprise-level infrastructure project with a Fortune 500 client. My LinkedIn photo was updated to one of me at a conference, and I posted a humble little blurb, exciting things in motion this quarter. Grateful for the team behind the scenes making magic happen. Hashtag cybersecurity, hashtag growth, hashtag 2025 goals. The post exploded. Comments from peers, DMs from investors, even a few former classmates who used to pretend I didn't exist. All of it added fuel to the image I was quietly constructing, not just of success, but of relevance, of momentum. And Cody? Cody wasn't even on LinkedIn. Next, I made a private list, names of people who'd been dismissive, condescending, or outright cruel over the years. Not out of spite, but for clarity. Lydia, obviously. My brother Mark, who never missed a chance to downplay my work. Uncle Jerry, who once asked if I ever planned to get a real job. And of course, Cody. But I wasn't going to confront them. Not directly. That would be too easy. No, what I wanted was something quieter. A tilt of the room. A shift in the energy. I wanted them to question everything they thought they knew about me. I'd already planted the seeds. Now I needed the right soil. 3 days before the brunch, I got another text. This time from an unknown number. Hi Aaron. This is Natalie, Cody's ex-fiancée. I stared at the screen. X. Hope this isn't too weird. I just wanted to say, I left him. After our talk. And I'm really grateful you told the truth. Helped me see things clearer. I didn't respond right away. I reread it a few times, letting it sink in. Then I texted back. I'm sorry you went through that. But I'm glad you got out. She replied almost instantly. Thank you. If you ever want to grab coffee sometime, no pressure. I told her maybe after the New Year's settled. And I meant it. But for now, I had a plan to finish. The morning of the brunch, I wore a navy wool coat, slacks, and a tailored black turtleneck. Clean, professional, understated. The kind of outfit that said, I didn't come here to play, but I don't need to announce it. I parked across the street from Lydia's house and took a moment in the car. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. Inside, the house was the same as always. Over-decorated, over-perfumed, and full of fake laughter. Lydia greeted me with that strained warmth she reserved for guests she secretly resented. There he is, she said. Glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, I replied. Cody was already holding court in the living room, surrounded by relatives, smiling that politician's smile. When he saw me, it flickered for just a second. Just long enough to let me know he was still rattled. Aaron, he said, forcing brightness into his voice. Long time, cousin. Good to see you, Cody, I said, shaking his hand firmly. Heard things got complicated. He laughed awkwardly. You know how it is. Not everything's meant to last. I nodded. True. Some things just out themselves, don't they? He didn't reply. The brunch was exactly as nauseating as I expected. Lydia handed out 2025 vision cards, and people went around the table sharing goals. My brother wanted to expand his consulting firm. Ellie was working on her doctorate. Cody, of course, announced he'd be re-strategizing his career and building something big in the tech space. I've got a few investors lined up, he said confidently. We'll see where it goes. Maybe I'll steal a few engineers from ByteNest. The room laughed. My knuckles tightened around my coffee mug. When it was my turn, I smiled softly and stood. My goals this year are simple, I said. Continue scaling ByteNest. Launch our new infrastructure project with SecureBridge. Expand our engineering team. Possibly open a satellite office in Berlin. A few heads turned. I caught my mother's eyes widen. Wait, Mark said. SecureBridge, SecureBridge. I nodded. We've been working with them since Q3. Partnership goes public end of the month. Cody's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Uncle Jerry cleared his throat. Isn't SecureBridge that? What do they do again? Cloud infrastructure, I said. They support half the Fortune 100. Aunt Pam looked impressed. Wow, that's major. I shrugged, like it was nothing. We're fortunate. Good timing, good team. The air in the room shifted. Suddenly, Cody's ambition seemed like cosplay. I sat back down. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at him. But I could feel the balance tilting. The story changing in real time. Lydia, ever the spin master, tried to regain control. Well, we're all proud of the whole family, she said. Everyone's doing amazing things. But it was too late. The seed had sprouted. Over the next half hour, relatives drifted toward me, asking questions, requesting advice. One uncle mentioned his son was looking for internships. Ellie asked if I could speak at her university's entrepreneurship panel. Even Mark, offered to grab lunch sometime to pick my brain. Cody said nothing. He kept sipping his mimosa, staring out the window. And I just smiled. Because this wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't ruin his life. I didn't humiliate him publicly. I didn't expose his lies. I just did what I'd always done. Worked quietly, built something real, and let the truth walk in on its own 2 feet. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because there was still one more thing I needed to do. Something that would end this story exactly the way it deserved. And all it required was an invitation. Which, as fate would have it, was waiting in my inbox that very night. Hey Aaron, ByteNest sounds amazing. Would love for you to come speak at our alumni entrepreneurship panel next month. Guest list includes a few folks from Everlock, Netgear, and StratTech. Let me know. Dana, Stanford Alumni Committee. I clicked reply. Would love to. And I have the perfect story to tell. Now it was just a matter of time. The night before the Stanford panel, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the lapels on my charcoal blazer, trying not to smirk. I'd been invited as the keynote speaker for their Founders in Tech series, a well-attended event meant to inspire the next wave of ambitious undergrads and fresh out-of-college builders. But for me, it was something more. I wasn't there to impress students. I was there to rewrite the story. I'd found out, through a mutual LinkedIn connection, that Everlock would have a few scouts in the room, mainly talent acquisition leads, but also someone from the partnerships team. The company Cody had been bragging about for months, the one he claimed had scouted him, was about to watch me speak from the front row. The irony wasn't lost on me. The auditorium was packed. Stanford's tech campus always buzzed with the kind of wide-eyed, caffeine-fueled energy I'd missed since my early 20s. Rows of clean notebooks, MacBooks open, startup hoodies everywhere. I stepped onto the stage, mic clipped to my collar, and looked out at the sea of faces. And then, in the third row, my eyes landed on him. Cody. He sat between 2 strangers, wearing a blazer that didn't quite fit and a smile that flickered when he met my gaze. I almost laughed. Of course he was here. He wasn't listed on any of the official materials. He must have registered late, maybe hoping to pitch himself to Everlock again, or ride the coattails of someone in the audience. Typical Cody. Always chasing gravity instead of creating it. I turned to the mic. Hi everyone. My name is Aaron. I'm the founder and CEO of ByteNest, a cybersecurity infrastructure firm based here in the Bay. Polite applause. I wasn't always a CEO. 10 years ago, I was just another kid with a clunky laptop and a bad haircut, tinkering with code between shifts at a grocery store. I didn't have a roadmap. What I did have was a lot of people telling me what I couldn't do. Heads nodded. I let the silence hang for a beat. Some of them were professors. Some were former bosses. Some were family. They didn't say it with malice. They said it with smiles. With raised eyebrows. With just kidding jokes that landed like darts. A few chuckles. They understood. I learned, early on, that the people closest to you won't always believe in you. Not because they're bad, but because your growth reminds them of their own stagnation. Your risk-taking exposes their fear. So they laugh. Or worse, they pretend you don't exist. The room quieted. But here's the thing. You don't need their permission. I let that sink in. You don't need applause to build something meaningful. You don't need a family full of founders or a list of angel investors at Thanksgiving. Sometimes, all you need is to keep showing up. Keep building. Quietly, patiently. Until one day, you're not in the background anymore. You're the room. Scattered claps turned into a full wave. I smiled, scanning the crowd again. Cody wasn't clapping. I wrapped the talk with a few anecdotes about ByteNest, how we launched with 3 people and a $15,000 seed grant, how we now employed over 80 full-time engineers across 3 countries, how we were preparing to roll out our largest partnership to date with SecureBridge, and how we had offers on the table for a Series C funding round that could push our valuation north of 9 figures. Afterward, there was a Q&A. A few students asked smart questions about scaling and hiring. Someone asked about startup failure rates. I answered them all. Then, I have a question, came a voice from the third row. Cody stood up. I'm Cody, he said, eyes darting nervously around the room. I'm, currently pivoting into tech entrepreneurship. What advice do you have for someone who's starting over after some missteps? He smiled, like we were teammates sharing an inside joke. I stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Great question, I said. Honestly, own the missteps. Don't pretend they were part of the plan. And definitely don't try to step over others to hide them. A few murmurs. Cody's smile faltered. People can forgive failure, I continued. But they don't forget how you made them feel. If you dismiss someone when they were rising, don't expect them to pull you up when they've arrived. He sat down. After the panel, a line of attendees formed to shake hands, hand out resumes, or just ask follow-up questions. Everlock's team came over too. The recruiter introduced herself, congratulated me, and then asked, "By the way, did you say your name was Aaron Kessler?" I nodded. She blinked. "You're the Aaron Kessler? ByteNest's founder." I smiled politely. "In the flesh. We actually had an applicant list you as a reference last quarter," she said, flipping through her notes. "But you never responded." My stomach turned, but I kept my expression flat. "Oh, who was that?" She showed me the name. "Cody Randall." I laughed. "Just once. Soft. I wouldn't recommend him," I said. She nodded, scribbled something, and moved on. By the time I left the auditorium, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long orange shadows across the pavement. My phone buzzed. "Cody, why did you say that to them? You know I need this." I didn't reply. Instead, I texted my mom. "Hope you're well. Just finished speaking at Stanford. Panel went great. Heading home now." She texted back 3 dots. Then a full minute later, I heard, "Cody called crying." What happened? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, "He tried to use me." Again, I told the truth. That's all. She didn't reply. I turned off my phone and walked to my car, exhaling slowly. 2 weeks later, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. Ellie was getting married in July. On the back, in handwritten script, was a note, "Hope you'll be there. You're finally being seen, cousin." Attached was a sticky note, "Cody's not invited." Long story. Let's talk soon. Ellie, I pinned it to my fridge. And just like that, the story shifted. Not with fireworks. Not with screaming matches or dramatic walkouts. But with clarity. With steady, quiet truth. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped crossing the ones that always led me back to pain. And as for Cody, he lost his mask long before I ever touched it. All I did was hand him a mirror.